thank you, everyone. It is great to be here. My name is Kevin Klein. I am the head of business development and partnerships at a platform called Revenue Roll. We are a identity resolution and retargeting platform. And I am excited to have our distinguished panelists here to talk about email. And I think it's a great place to start to maybe talk about the last line of that previous panel about email marketing and where they thought it stood. We're going to be the counter opinion to that, which is great. It's diverse opinions. I love debate. But before I get started, I would love to give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves, and then we'll dig in.
All right. Hey guys. Thanks, Kevin. I'm Josh, co-founder and CEO of Kronos. We're a retention agency, so email is a big part of what we do. We've done this we've built and ran over 500 retention programs for brands of varying sizes, varying industries, 50% of which are in the US, and the other half across APAC and Europe. So that gives us a lot of insights and data. We run about 1,600 split tests per month, and that generates about an 8% lift per month as well. So compounding that across a year, that's a lot. And we pollinate those insights to our brands and the businesses that we work with.
Hi guys, my name is Nicole. I'm Director of Marketing and E-com at State Bags.
State is the original family bag brand. We make backpacks, luggage, travel accessories for the whole family, so for men, women, and kids. If you live in New York City and you've walked around the streets around pickup or drop-off time, you've probably seen really cool dinosaur backpacks or sparkly backpacks and thought, oh my God, that's a backpack. That's us. And we're also a give back brand. So for every bag sold, State donates a percentage of the proceeds to American children, families, and communities in need in the ways they need most.
So to start, I think a great place to maybe ground this conversation is we've heard a lot about retention, different aspects of retention. Can you just give us like a good definition of how you think about retention and how are you optimizing it? And how are you optimizing for it? What metrics are you looking at? And what matters to you in your business when it comes to retention? I'll start with Nicole.
Yeah, so for us, retention is just bringing a customer back, whether it's their second purchase, their third purchase, their fourth purchase. It's extremely important part of our strategy, especially selling bags. You don't really need a backpack every week. So for us, we had to get really strategic with how we're bringing people back. So, selling kids and adult bags is part of the strategy. So we have bags for the kids, and then when the parents need something for themselves, we have it for them. We've also expanded into other categories. So we were really well known for our backpacks, expanded into luggage, weekenders, totes, you name it. Looking at across all different metrics, looking at things like return customer rate, looking at kind of overall count of return customers year over year and month over month, and return customer revenue. Those are some of the key metrics that we look at.
Yeah. And going a little bit more granular, since we're talking about email is often thought about as a revenue channel, but I think that's not entirely accurate. Revenue is much derived from the performance of your landing pages, your site, and a bunch of other factors. So success in a retention program like email alone is often looked at as a traffic source versus a revenue source. So when we assess retention programs, we look at clicks as a measure of success, and not just click rates alone, which is often taken as a North Star success metric for emails. But click rates can be often deceiving. So we look at how the absolute number of clicks are evolving over time.
It makes sense. So in specifically when it comes to email, Nicole, what are you looking for? What are you paying attention to? And how are you optimizing for retention in your email marketing channel?
Yeah, email has been a key part of our retention strategy. I think there are a lot of different ways we think about it. But specifically looking at things like our flows, that's been really valuable for us, thinking about how we can use automated flows so we can set them up and obviously check in on them every once in a while, but those are constantly drivers of bringing those customers back to our site for different reasons that they might actually need. We're never creating a false reason for a customer to come back. We're not going to tell them the week after they bought a kid's backpack, come get another kid's backpack. But we're going to say, did you get a lunchbox? And then in a couple other months, we're going to say, did you know we also have amazing luggage that matches the backpack? And then maybe a little bit after that, we'll say, now that you have all this amazing product that you love, did you know we also make stuff for you too that you might also love? And at that point, we've also already kind of like gained their trust, and they know that our bags are functional and amazing, and then they might be ready to hear from us again and come back for another purchase.
Josh, what about you? And when you're advising brands, when you look into an account, like you log into an ESP and you're taking a look at their metrics, like what stands out to you that you see consistently, and how does that relate to retention? If you know their retention is a good spot or a bad spot,
A good indication of success is if we see a growth in raw clicks over time. So kind of playing into my first point. As well as I think about sustainability of the program as well. So revenue not just in the short term, but how it's going to pan out in 12 months. So I look at negative engagement metrics. So what I like to see as a kind of time horizon is an increase in clicks and a decrease in bounce, unsubs, and spam rates. And that's often a good initial indicator of success. And then we dive a little bit deeper into where those clicks are coming from. One often overlooked aspect of a retention program is pretty obvious, but a lot of brands really don't think too much about this, is a cart recovery flow or cart abandonment flow, and the preceding series of abandonment emails that come with browse, site abandonment, and stuff. We like to see a minimum 10% conversion rate on cart abandonment, which is not typical. Most brands are converting at about 3 to 4%. The reason we know that to be true is that we've done a ton of split tests around what can be and what is possible. So that's often one of the first few places that we look into in terms of maximizing revenue for a program.
So Nicole, I'm thinking about, since you're running an email marketing program right now, when you're optimizing for LTV and retention, what are some tactics that you've used previously? And have you come across any like mistakes, or have you made mistakes yourself that the audience can learn from?
Yeah, totally. So I think right now there's a lot of buzzwords in the retention space. Personalization for me was a really overwhelming one at first because of how many different product categories and products we have. And I just got so overwhelmed that I just like didn't for a long time. And then I kind of reframed the thinking, and I was like, well, most of our customers originally come in through the kids' backpack. So let's just set up some stuff for the kids' backpack, and then we can worry about the other categories once we can test that and learn from that and see what works. I think a big problem right now is like that overcomplication of things. You get overwhelmed and then you just don't act. I think it's really important to act and then edit. Act, learn, and edit, really, and go from there. So that's been really, really powerful for us. Also, yeah, look at where your sales are coming in and look at which products are driving high LTV. For us, most people are coming in through our kids' backpacks. Our luggage customers are our highest LTV. So if we can get all of those customers, we probably won't get all of them too, but if we can get a lot of them to come back for kids' luggage, that's a big win for us.
Josh, what about you? When you're advising brands, any common mistakes that you see, and how are you telling or advising them to optimize for LTV?
This one's a tough one. Discounting. Discounting is a core part of a lot of our retention programs, but it's also very important to look at what's happening off the back of that. One of the brands that I've looked at, luxury marketplace, the instances where a discount, a sale, or any sort of reduction in value was mentioned in emails, the subsequent AOVs were half of what would be typical. So it's 2.2K versus 4.2, about half, which is huge, because then you're setting up a relationship based off discounts, and following that, when we look at LTV, GP, gross profit over time, it's significantly lower than what a typical customer would be at. So while conversion rates might be higher in the short term, and you might see a much higher rate of just purchases, but you might be just giving up a lot of margins off the back of that over like a 12-month time horizon. So it's really important to look at cohort analysis in instances like these. And also kind of compare what the conversion rate might look like when you do that.
Makes sense. So no panel would be complete, or a panel about email rather would be complete without a discussion about deliverability. I think this is in my business at Revenue Roll. I think it's talked about pretty much every day, and I know it's a major concern for a lot of brands with some changes that Yahoo and Google and Outlook have made recently. Talk to me about how that plays into your retention strategy and how are you optimizing for deliverability. I guess we'll start with you, Nicole.
Yeah, so we definitely rely on external partners to, make sure that our email program is in a good place with deliverability. But one thing I will say, and something that we had to learn the hard way, is we were sending almost every campaign at one point to our full list, which obviously now everyone's probably like, oh my God, what? And it really affected our domain reputation. I think it's really important to not be afraid to exclude segments, tighten up your segments. It feels scary at first because your list size decreases dramatically, but realistically, all those people that you're cutting out were not engaging with your emails anyway, so you're just saving money and also protecting your domain reputation. So I would say just making sure you're tightening up those segments and excluding things like unengaged segments, recently bounced, those sorts of things.
What about you, Josh? I mean, what do people get wrong about deliverability? I mean, you talk to a lot of brands on a day in and day out basis. Like, what's misunderstood about it? Why is it this opaque topic in e-commerce?
Well, deliverability ultimately is the ability to land the right messages into the right inboxes at the right time, right? And I think of it as two parts. There's a soft kind of human component to it, because active actions of disengagement, like spam, marked as spam, unsubscribes, are human behaviors. These are not algorithms that you're dealing with. On the other hand, there's also the Gmail algorithm that you got to care about. So I'll give a kind of quick tip on both. On the human side of things, naturally, the more engaging and relevant information and content and messaging are, naturally people are going to stay on your list for a longer time. So we do this with better segmentations, to Nicole's point. Just taking in zero-party data earlier on in the funnel, like pre-purchase surveys as well as post-purchase surveys, which has been talked about, and leading into better messaging down the funnel. On the technical side of things, there is a metric that I don't think many people have talked about. We look at the ratio between number of spams and number of unsubscribes as a combination to the total number of clicks. So spams plus unsubscribes over clicks. Anything above 50%, if that goes above 50%, that is a really good indicator of declining deliverability. You're often going to see 2 months from that point, you're going to see your inboxing rate go down. So it's something that we pay a lot of attention to, and making sure that engagement is positive and not negative.
I mean, it's a great point. I mean, a lot of the time when we're doing like deliverability audits or Revenue Roll, like we're running effectively what's called a Glock apps test, where we're actually seeing like whether or not they're in promotion or spam. But like I think every single day on our customer success motion is like, how are their domain reputation in Google withstanding, right? What's their IP reputation? And then just providing those exact same best practices. Interesting you say that about the human side of things, because I think, again, no discussion about email can really be talked about, but like what content you're sending and like frequency. And when I talk with brands, the common questions I get is like, how often should I send? Should I send all the time? Should I send to my full list? How do you think about that, Nicole, like in terms of frequency and like even content, and what are you putting in your emails and what have you found to be effective?
Yeah, obviously there's no sweet spot, and it really depends on the time of year. Something that I think is really valuable with the idea of focusing on your flows and optimizing your flows is that if those are constantly running and optimized, then you don't need to be so focused on making sure a campaign goes out every X number of days. I remember I used to make campaign calendars and just be like, oh, it's a Tuesday and there's no email to send. Like, let me make something up. That's a waste of money and a waste of time. So make sure your flows are automated so you don't really need to worry about it. But obviously campaigns are also still super important. Certain times of year, this might be controversial, but like I send a lot of emails. Black Friday, if you're not at the top of the inbox, no one's seeing the email. The email inbox is flooded anyways. Like I want to be at the top of the inbox. I'm going to send multiple times a day and start excluding from there. So again, it really depends on the time of year. And for us, back to school, again, we're super seasonal. So back to school is our best time of year. I'm sending an email almost every day to customers who purchased last back to school and haven't purchased yet, and excluding from there. So don't be afraid to do that. But again, on that note, you do have to get creative with what you're sending. Something we've leaned into that's been really valuable for us is text-based emails, which is just like a plain email in the format you would see from like a colleague or anyone else. And we send them from our CX team, our co-founder. They're all really from me, but they say that they're from those people. And people respond really well to them. I think it's just because they're so different to what they're used to seeing, which is like a beautifully designed campaign. It just feels real and relatable and special, and it stands out. So
human, right?
Human, exactly. Yeah. So we'll send an email that's like 2 sentences from our co-founder being like, I just took a trip and I used this weekender and it was amazing. Like, check it out. And those emails are usually our top performing emails. So if you feel like you're sending too much, but you want to keep sending, I would lean into something like that feels a little bit more approachable.
Just playing this to that really quickly. I love that approach because it does 2 things. One, it generates a lot of engagement as well. I like ending emails like that with a question and a call to action being, hey, reply to this email with your favorite whatever. And I automate that as part of my flows. And the outcome of that, so playing to deliverability as well, is that that's a good signal to Google and Yahoo and these ISPs that you're an active sender where people are actually actively engaging with your emails. And that's a good sign. And automating that means that you're consistently getting inboxes from customers as well.
How do you think about frequency, Josh? Like, what do you advise brands when they're saying, like, how many emails should I send on a weekly, monthly? I mean, I've always heard the old adage is like send. Yeah. But I'm curious though how you position it.
I think about it in 2 ways. One, frequency of sends from a user's point of view. So how many emails am I actually getting as an individual on their list? And 2, what other messages am I receiving across the different channels? We have a really cool campaign planner that we built at the agency that spans across email, SMS, push notifications, postcards, social media, blogs, basically all the retention channels you can think about. And we make sure that there is a good diversity of messaging channels that we're tackling, customers and prospects with, but also the frequency of emails landing in each segment of customers. So we've got for example, a client that sells beauty products called Cure Skincare, and we segment our list by pain points: fine lines and wrinkles, pigmentation, acne, and each segment of customers get a slightly different variation of our campaigns, so there is no overlap in messaging.
All right, so I'm thinking around lines of like experimentation. I talk to a lot of brands who are trying to get that edge in email marketing. Any experiments that you're running? But I guess open panel, whoever wants to answer this one. In terms of like what experiments are you running right now? Any failed experiments? Anything that you've tried recently that's worked well that the audience can take away from?
I think it's important to constantly be testing. If you're on Klaviyo or whatever ESP you're using, it's really, really easy to test. You should just test for everything. You need to constantly be relearning the customer and how they're engaging. It's constantly changing these days. So you never really know, right? And I'll have people from the brand side be like, let's lead with a lifestyle imagery. And I'm like, let's test it. And maybe text actually works better. So I think it's just like constantly trying new things and seeing what works and never feeling like you actually figured it out because maybe you did for like a week and then next week you didn't. That wasn't a tangible thing. But I think it's important, and it's so easy to just like change the hero image from one's lifestyle, one's text-based, see which does better, and then lean into that for a little bit until you want to test it again. Once you use your campaigns to test things and see what works, like make sure you're layering that information into your flows too.
How about you, Josh? Doing any testing out any apps?
Lots. We run a ton of split tests, but you guys are an advanced bunch, so I'm not going to go into the basic details of that. Like, GIF-based moving CTAs, those work really, really great in a lot of our tests. But a couple of really new things that we're testing out right now. AI voice notes. There's a platform called Para, P-A-R-A, usepara.com, that we're experimenting with, leaving ringless voicemails in our customers' inboxes. Work really well with SMS as well as emails on the mobile front. Also, personalized videos. And both of these platforms are kind of similar in a way, where you could essentially speak to the individual recipient, like, hey, Kevin, notice that you're shopping on our site and you're browsing for products that help with building muscle. And here are some recommendations that I think might be relevant to you. And it's an actual human person's voice saying that, right, versus like an AI-generated type of deal. And that's been really, really interesting, and we're still concluding on its results, but I think it's going to pan out well.
Very, very cool. All right, so final thoughts. If there's one thing you want this audience to remember, and we didn't rehearse this question, so I'm throwing it out to them. What would it be? What would be the final takeaway if you had one piece of advice for everyone in the audience when it comes to email marketing?
When I think about email, I think about it as a way to connect with your customer. You're in their phone, you're in their inbox. It's a really personal channel, even though it doesn't feel that way because it's so overwhelming and everyone's getting a million emails every day, but it still is really personal. I think if we can bring it back to that feeling of it feeling like a personal connection with your customer rather than a sales pitch or a ping, I think that's really valuable. Making your customer feel like they're a part of a community, giving them a reason to receive your emails, whether it's like tips or something like that, or like an actual recommendation from someone on your team, just checking in from someone on your team. Again, those personal touch points I think are really valuable and will go a really long way.
Josh, how about you?
Really quick one. Email is a very valuable real estate, and we see customers spend about 11 seconds per email on average, and 3 seconds per SMS on average. So there's tons of talk around SMS, but email is still a core component of our retention strategy, and is the lead in to a lot of the work that we do. So yeah, treat it as such. You have a lot more real estate to play around with on emails than you would have on SMS or MMS.
Amazing. I think we have time for questions.
So if you have a question, okay, great. We'll start over here.
Hi, my name is Layla. I'm with the Dormy. I was wondering, so with our email strategy, we do a ton of A/B testing, like almost every day. Honestly, we A/B test subject lines and landing pages and copy and things like that. And the upside to that is that a couple times a month, we walk away with really strong conclusions that we can build upon. And the downside is that more often than not, with every single test, the results are so similar that we don't have a conclusion to come from. And at the end of the day, we would have been more optimized had we not tested. And I'm wondering if either of you have found a kind of sweet spot in between that in terms of frequency of A/B testing.
That's interesting. I think like when I do a test in Klaviyo, I always set it up so that there's like only a percentage of the audience receiving the test, and then the remainder of the audience will receive the winning variation. So to me, it doesn't really feel like a loss. I definitely agree. You can kind of test yourself to insanity where you're just like, what am I doing? This is just a waste of my time. Honestly, I would like rely heavily on ChatGPT for that. Put your test learnings in there, ask them for a summary of what you've learned and what you need to learn next in order to kind of like get your program to the next level. And also just like trust your gut too. Like we're all consumers too at the end of the day, and we know our consumer pretty well based on how much time we spend learning about them. So if it feels like a waste of time, it probably is a waste of time, and take that time somewhere else.
I'll have a quick one to add there. I'd say that going too granular with tests is also a trap. We've made the same mistake. So instead of going from the ground up, we think about testing from a hypothesis level per segment. So for example, it might be that my dog owners in my list are more responsive to humorous copy, right? And that's all I would be testing throughout the month, and I would draw a conclusion from those tests. And that would be a key learning that becomes a core part of my playbook for that brand. And then that would be retested again, maybe in the next quarter, and so on and so forth. So I don't really have to recycle through every hypothesis every single week. And that compounds on my learning a little bit better. And in Novembers and Decembers, we rarely ever test. Because at that point in time, by then, we would have a very compelling series of ideas that we can then deploy into all of our emails.
Amazing. Other questions?
Hi, I'm Sean from Alia, and quick plug on us, like we do pop-ups through an app. We see between 10 to 15% opt-in rates. So if you guys are interested in better email opt-ins, talk to me. But
Well done.
I guess my question for you, like both of you mentioned segmentation, and I think Josh, you mentioned around like zero-party data from both pre-purchase and post-purchase. Would love to hear any best practices you guys have seen from like using that data to segment customers the best, and like any specific plays that you've seen work well for those as well.
For me, I find the most value in using it actually to exclude segments when I feel like I'm being a little bit aggressive on sending. So for example, during back to school, when I'm pretty aggressive, I take all of our adult-only customers and just exclude them because I'm like, you probably don't care about this, and it's annoying to see third graders in your email inbox every day. So I think that's been a really valuable way to utilize those tools, is actually like, yes, it's really great to use them to get the right message to the right person, but it's also really helpful to use it so that you don't send the wrong message to the wrong person too.
We often think about incremental profiling. So we collect one data point at a time, so it's not too overwhelming. We've also experimented with quiz funnels for products that are, with a longer consideration period, maybe AOVs of over $1,000. That's worked really well for us as well. But yeah, pop-ups are a big part of our strategy. We built a really cool pop-up for this Australian brand called the Udi, if anyone of you knows. Back in 2020, they ended up having the highest performing pop-up that Klaviyo has seen, capturing at a 44% rate. But a big part of the reason to that was just understanding what drove action and behavior, and then starting from there, capturing one data point, and then incrementally building a profile from there.
Amazing. Do we have time for one more? Yeah. Anyone else? Any other questions? Going once. Oh, here we go.
My question's about subject lines and any tips on strong subject lines, and also your thoughts on emojis in the subject line.
Buy
That's
now.
a great question.
Smiley face.
I mean, this is an old trick, but urgency always works really well for us. So I definitely lean into that without getting too salesy. That's kind of a hard line to teeter between. Emojis are something that I haven't found like a big like discrepancy with my test with emojis. I think just like when it makes sense, I use them, and when it doesn't, I don't. A lot of caps, like all caps, does really well for us, surprisingly, even though it's like very aggressive. But again, I've also been using ChatGPT a lot to help with subject lines. I'll have it help me create like my whole email calendar, and then I'll be like, okay, now create briefs for my graphic designer and subject lines and test and subject lines to test. So I would say like I would definitely recommend leaning into that.
I think about pattern interrupts. So I look at what my competitors are sending, what their emails are looking like, subject lines, and what we're sending on a regular basis. And I find ways to stand out by zagging when everyone else is zigging. Something that most brands don't test out is single word subject lines and no caps, so like all lowercase. Fascinating, worth a shot. Oh, and also, yeah, we've tested it and it works. Not just an idea.
All right. Well, a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much. We are all around. If you're interested in learning about Revenue Roll, I'll be here all day. Josh is here. Nicole is here as well. And thank you so much for your time.